Ever lay awake at night wondering about the future? Like, what happens if a country the whole world depends on
Yeah.
kind of just starts to fall apart? And I'm not talking about some science fiction dystopia. I mean, within our lifetime.
Yeah, it's a pretty unsettling thought.
Totally.
And we always imagine collapse as this big, dramatic Hollywood movie type event, but honestly, it's usually more of a slow burn, right? Like the kind of thing that creeps up on you until suddenly one day things are just different.
Exactly. And that actually leads perfectly into today's deep dive. We're looking at this 2008 study from the Air University.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, that Air University.
Interesting.
And they use Nigeria as a case study to basically lay out how this major player on the world stage could become a failed state by the year 2030.
Wow.
So pretty intense stuff.
Yeah, and to be clear, right, the study isn't trying to predict the future or anything.
Right.
It's more of a thought experiment, you know?
Yeah.
A what-if scenario designed to get people thinking about, like, how to prepare for potential threats, strategic thinking, that sort of thing.
Right. It's all about understanding what could happen and why. And believe me, there's a lot to unpack here. So for those who need a quick refresher, Nigeria, Africa's most populated country.
Yeah.
Actually, did you know 1 in 4 people in sub-Saharan Africa is Nigerian?
It's a massive population.
Huge. And a massive country, too. 3 times the size of California, overflowing with oil wealth. You'd think they'd be doing all right.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, just having resources, even a lot of them, doesn't magically make a country strong or stable. I mean, Nigeria has a long history with military coups, for example.
Yeah.
Corruption that seems like it's, built into the system itself. And on top of that, all these simmering ethnic and religious tensions bubbling below the surface. It's like all these cracks in the foundation just waiting for something to...
Yeah, exactly. And that brings us to this whole failed state concept.
Yeah.
Because we hear it thrown around a lot, but what does it even mean? Like, what actually is a failed state?
So imagine a country where the government can't even do the most basic things we expect a government to do.
Okay.
Like they can't protect their borders.
Right.
They can't enforce the law. Can't even provide essential services to their people, healthcare, infrastructure.
Yeah.
That's the essence of a failed state.
So basically no law and no order at all.
Basically, yeah. The study uses the definition from something called the Failed State Index, which is a real thing. And it describes a failed state as a place where the government has basically lost control. They've lost their grip on power and can't fulfill any of their basic functions.
Okay, so then a failed state, that impacts everyone, right? Not just that one country, even if we're not exactly next-door neighbors.
Oh, absolutely. A failed state, especially one as large and influential as Nigeria, it creates these ripples that spread far and wide.
Right.
I mean, think about it. You'd probably see mass migration, regional instability. This creates a vacuum for extremist groups to potentially take root.
Right.
The study even brings up Somalia as, a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Remember that Black Hawk Down incident?
Oh, yeah.
That was a very, very stark reminder of what can happen when a country completely collapses.
Yeah.
And then the international community is forced to step in, often with disastrous results.
Right. Somalia is definitely a prime example and a tragic one for sure. But it's what makes this Air University study so fascinating, even if it is a little unnerving. They don't just, define what a failed state looks like in a textbook kind of way. They actually try to map out how Nigeria could get there by 2030.
Right.
And some of the specifics they get into are pretty wild.
Yeah, it's interesting how they connect those internal vulnerabilities you were just talking about with external shocks.
Yeah.
It's not always one big thing that causes a country to collapse, right? It's more often this chain reaction. You might have all these underlying problems, but then it's that one specific event that kind of tips the scales.
Right, like a domino effect.
Exactly.
And speaking of tipping scales, the study brings up a pretty scary scenario on the economic front. Total collapse of oil prices. Not even just a gradual decline, but like a full-blown plummet. And they say it could be caused, in part, by all the advances in renewable energy.
Interesting. And that's where this whole resource curse idea comes into play.
Yeah.
Nigeria is so reliant on oil revenue that even with all their wealth, a price shock like that could be absolutely devastating. We're talking about their government suddenly not being able to fund basic services, infrastructure projects falling apart left and right. The entire economy could easily spiral out of control. Imagine you put all your eggs in one basket, and then someone walks up and just kicks the basket off the table.
Ouch. Yeah, not a pretty picture.
Not at all.
And to make matters even wilder, the study suggests that in all that chaos, there could be a peaceful Islamic political takeover.
Interesting.
And not through violence or anything, but by, like, strategically taking advantage of all the corruption that's already happening down in the South.
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? It just highlights how political maneuvering, especially when you combine it with things like a rapidly growing population, that can be just as powerful as any weapon.
Right.
Power dynamics in a country can shift so quickly, and those who understand how to navigate those shifts, they can gain the upper hand surprisingly easily.
It's all about strategy.
Exactly.
And then you've got this whole demographic armament factor they bring up.
Right.
Which, I gotta say, it's a pretty intense term.
It does sound kind of scary, yeah.
Yeah. But basically, they're suggesting that Nigeria's massive young population, instead of being this huge asset, it could actually become a major source of instability.
Yeah, and that's a common thread you see in a lot of these scenarios, unfortunately.
Right.
If all those young people can't find jobs, they can't build a future for themselves, it's tragically easy to see how they could become vulnerable to radicalization. You get enough young people who feel like they have no hope, that can really destabilize a country from the inside out.
Yeah. And it's not like there's any shortage of groups out there who are ready and willing to exploit that kind of frustration and anger.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why investing in human capital, especially in places like Nigeria, is so important. Education, job training, creating a sense of hope for the future. All of that is absolutely essential, especially when you've got a society that's already grappling with so many ethnic and religious divisions.
Okay, so we've got economic turmoil, political upheaval, a whole generation of young people who are, kind of teetering on the brink.
Right.
And if all that wasn't enough, the study throws in another curveball: MEND.
Yes. The movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta. I was wondering when they'd come up.
Right. This is where it really starts to feel like we're stepping into a Tom Clancy novel or something.
Totally.
So for those who aren't familiar with MEND, give us the rundown. Who are they, and what role do they play in all of this?
So, at their core, they're an insurgent group that's been fighting for control of the Niger Delta region for years. And they're a powerful force, but they're not just your average oil rebels, at least not in this scenario. Yep. By 2030, the study suggests MEND could be receiving funding and training from, wait for it, eco-terrorists.
Eco-terrorists. Now that's a new one.
Yeah.
But then again, when you really think about it,
it makes a weird kind of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, actually.
The Niger Delta has been absolutely ravaged by oil production, right? So these radical environmental groups might see MEND as their best shot at actually fighting back against big oil, no matter how extreme the methods.
Wow. Okay, so we're not just talking about insurgents here. We're talking about insurgents bankrolled by international eco-terrorists.
It sounds crazy, but that's the scenario the study lays out, yeah?
That's a whole new level.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about how technology just completely changes the game in situations like this.
Absolutely. I mean, on one hand, technology is a powerful force for progress, new energy sources, better communication, all that. But on the other hand, it can be used to disrupt and destabilize just as easily.
Right.
These groups, they can use social media to connect with each other all across the globe, spread their message, recruit new members. They can even find funding through online platforms. The internet has made it incredibly easy to create these kinds of transnational networks.
It's definitely a different world when you've got groups like MEND that have access to the same tools and technology as the governments they're up against.
No doubt. It's like that old saying, right? Technology is a tool. Right. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack with this study.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get kind of caught up in the whole doom and gloom aspect of it all.
Right.
But it's not like these guys, have a crystal ball or anything.
Yeah.
They're not actually saying Nigeria will become a failed state, right?
Exactly. That's the thing people always seem to misunderstand about these kinds of studies. The authors are very clear. This is not about predicting the future. Think of it more like, a stress test. Like they're pushing the boundaries of what's possible just to see where the weak points are.
Okay, it's more like a thought exercise.
Exactly. And the hope is that by identifying those potential breaking points, it'll encourage people to come up with solutions before it's too late, Proactive measures instead of reactive ones.
Right, get ahead of the curve. But that brings up another question. I mean, I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, okay, this is all very interesting and terrifying, but what can I do about it? It's not like any of us can single-handedly fix Nigeria's problem.
You don't have to. That's the beauty of it. Yeah. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just stay informed, understand the challenges a country like Nigeria is facing, because it's complicated, right?
Oh,
It's this
yeah.
whole complex web of economic factors, social factors, political factors, but just having that awareness, that understanding, that's the first step towards finding solutions, even if those solutions are happening on a global scale.
So awareness is key.
Yeah.
But I mean, we are talking about a study that's coming from the Air University.
Mm.
So I got to imagine they have some thoughts on, concrete action, especially when it comes to potential military responses.
They do. And this is where things get really interesting, because you might expect, a military study to focus on troop movements and airstrikes and all that.
Typical military stuff.
Exactly. But this study, it actually emphasizes something you might not expect, something pretty crucial: cultural understanding.
Really?
They argue that really knowing a population and their values, it's just as important as knowing, like, their military capabilities, if not more important.
Wait, hold on. The Air Force is advocating for, like, cultural sensitivity training.
Yeah.
That's not exactly what comes to mind when I picture, like, Top Gun.
Right. It's this fascinating little twist, but when you think about it, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
In a complex situation like this, you can't just throw military might at the problem and expect it to go away.
Right.
That's just going to make things worse. You have to actually understand what's motivating people. You have to understand the root causes of these problems, of the grievances that are fueling things like, insurgencies and unrest. And that's what allows you to come up with these really targeted interventions that actually address the real issues, not just the symptoms.
So it's less about shock and awe and more about empathy.
Yeah, basically. It's about understanding where people are coming from, what they need, what their hopes and fears are. And the study goes even further, actually. They talk about the potential of innovative technologies. And I'm not just talking about weapon systems.
Okay.
We're talking about things like using garbage to generate power.
Wow.
Finding more sustainable ways to actually meet people's basic needs, showing them that there's a different path, a more hopeful future out there. It's about offering real solutions, not just more force.
That's definitely something I think we can all get behind. So if we're going to try to, tie all of this together, it sounds like the future of a nation. It really comes down to more than just, how much money they have or how strong their military is. It's about the choices people make, the institutions they build, the values they choose to prioritize.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that fundamental shared humanity that connects all of us. And if that's true for a country like Nigeria, thousands of miles away, what does that say about the choices we're making right here, right now, in our own communities?
That's a really good question, one that I hope our listeners will continue to think about. And if you'd like to dive a little deeper into this whole topic, we've included a bunch of great resources in the show notes, including some more info on that failed states index we talked about.
Always a good idea to do a little more digging.
Always. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, this was great.
It was a heavy one today. Until next time, keep those brains engaged, everybody.